Hello everyone. NegroVMX here. Welcome back with more of Dragon Quest for the Switch. So let's see, what are we at? 5209? We got a ways to go still, but thankfully it hasn't been as bad as I thought it was going to be, where I just, have to fight like one or two battles before I have to run back. And that's because normally I don't get here with enough money to get the Burning Sword, or whatever the hell it's called in this version. The Flame Sword. What is it? Is it Fireblade? It's Fireblade. Normally I have to grind up for that too, So it's not something that I normally am able to just get. What are you doing, Gibbs? Cosmic Chimera. So that definitely makes things a little easier. Okay. Ooh. I wish there was a way to lock the controls on that. There isn't, huh? That'd be cool, like if you could press a button that just like locks it. I'd probably constantly be hitting that button, though. Another Durg. Alright. Durg Jerg. Alright. Durg Jog. Oh, he's just attacking for 20 damage, and then outspeeding me there, and then dodging. Alright, this is a little dangerous. Alright, I was gonna say, if that doesn't kill, it's very dangerous. Little dangerous, very dangerous. Luckily, it didn't get to very dangerous. At some point, if I want to, like, stream or play, like, or let's play the old Dragon Quest games, I'm gonna have to play the NES versions at some point, right? It's just like, never streamed or let's play the NES version of Dragon Quest. I did a let's play of Game Boy version. I did a stream of Super Famicom. I did a stream of the mobile. And now I'm let's playing the Switch one, so. Never did the NES versions. Maybe at one point, they do have a charm to them, It'd be interesting to see Gray's reaction to Dragon Quest 2 on the NES. He'd be like, oh god. Alright. I'm going for it just because I know I can two-shot him. And even if I don't, I know they don't heal themselves, so. What am I at? 6360. This piece of shit. Alright. Damn. Alright. Try one more. Fizzle. Ah, you fizzled. Alright. Don't leave my health alone. It's at 69. It's like, yeah, you could two-shot it, but you're just like running into that issue of him pounding you with sizzle or putting you to sleep or whatever, And by the next boss, does like to use snooze, rather. So we're going to have to fizzle him right away, and he hits really hard physically. So the hope is that you get the fizzle off right away, and then he wastes some turn trying to use snooze. But because I might die to him a few times, I always make the, I need to stay at the end. I don't go after him until after I've bought everything. Like, there's nothing left to buy. You have to get the silver shield. This really... What are you gonna buy? A key? Like nothing expensive. I remember once somebody was telling me that the damage for the electric floor in Dragon Quest 1 was an instant kill. And I was like, no, it's not. And they're like, yeah, it is. You step on it and you die until you have Erdrick's armor. And I'm like, no, that's very much not the case. And then I realized what must have happened is they must have went on it. What they must have done is they must have went on it, like maybe in Tantagel Castle or something, when they didn't have enough health to even walk on it. Like they might have had less than... Because I believe in the original version it was 15 damage actually in the NES. And they might have had less and stepped on it and been like, dead. They might have thought it was going to be like Poison Marsh, where it takes 1 health point. And they must have thought, oh, that's instant kill. And it reminded me of a discussion about game design. Oop, didn't two-shot him. That, well, Richard Garriott was a part of it. And if you don't know Richard Garriott, he was the creator of the Ultima series. And, Ultima was really big in the 80s, and it was, like, very much like the inspiration that, somebody just sent me a Steam gift. Hold on. I literally just saw a thing pop up saying, oh, shit. Awesome. Sweet. I just thanked them, and I just thought maybe it's bad taste to thank them for the gift because they're sending the gift as a thanks for something that I did. Well, me and a bunch of other people. But, you know what? I don't care if we get caught in the thank you loop. I thank people when they send me a gift. But hopefully it's not taken the wrong way. But anyway, there was a discussion. Okay, so yeah, Ultima was usually important because basically Dragon Quest started as Yuji Hoри's like two favorite games were Ultima and Wizardry. They were pretty similar early on. Wizardry and Ultima sort of diverted pretty far away from each other, but early on they were very similar. And Yuji Horii was really big into both of them, and it was, hey, could we do this on a Famicom? So you can't discount Ultima and Wizardry as being incredibly important for early influence on JRPGs, right? But anyway, there was a discussion about game design that Richard Garriott was part of, and he used the example of something that... Oh! One moment. There's a level up. We hit level 16. Yeah, you definitely level up faster in this. Alright, cool. What's my max hit points now? It's 106. Okay, cool. It's not always the same, by the way. Like, right now, my max hit points at level 16 is level 106. It might not be for you. Stat growth is actually dependent on what name you put in. But anyway, I digress. So, something that sounds like a really cool idea on paper might not translate so well into gameplay. And one of the example that he used is, because the thing about Western RPGs, remember, I'm not talking about necessarily RPGs made in Europe and the United States. I'm talking about in that style. You know what I mean? I'm not necessarily talking about anything but in that style. Western RPGs as a style. Just like Japanese RPGs JRPGs don't have to be Japanese, right? American people are perfectly capable of making JRPGs. Black Onyx is an example of a European guy making a JRPG. But anyway, that style... Oh, really? Knight Errant? I think I could take him on. Hold on. They kind of, like, it goes more for... See, I don't think Western RPG and JRPGs are really good descriptors. I think that Western RPGs should be called sim RPGs, and JRPGs should be called story RPGs, because JRPGs are all about experiencing a story, right? Whereas... Oh, I didn't fizzle him. Hopefully this turns out not too badly. Alright, we got him. Because when you think of what Western RPGs are, like the modern equivalent of old Western RPGs, like it used to be Ultima and Wizardry or whatever, right? Now it's Fallout, Skyrim, right? And yes, there's stories. There absolutely is. But you have a lot of freedom. You could experience the story, or you could choose to not experience the story. And it's really about making something immersive, right? Simish, right? So... an example of a mechanic that he, because they were always trying to think of, like, how realistic can we make it? How can we make it realistic, right? And one example was, there's a bridge over a river, right? And it's sort of not in the greatest shape. And maybe the game tells you that, right? There's this bridge, it doesn't look like it's in the greatest shape, right? Whether it's conveying that visually or through words, you don't know, right? And then they said, well, what if we come up with the idea of, your character's weight playing a factor there. Whereas, because Western RPGs are really all about things like that, where you have to worry about how much you weigh, it's like a whole thing. You cannot fast travel while over encumbered, What if we have it where if you're above a certain weight, the bridge collapses, right? And this was brought up in like a board meeting or something, right? Like, or not a board meeting, but like a meeting, a development meeting. And everybody's like, wow, that's such a cool idea. I love that, And Richard Gary's like, that's terrible. That's fucking awful, right? And they're looking at him like, what are you talking about? That's the exact kind of thing that you need, that you like. You like that kind of like realism. And he says, but it's not good game design. And they're like, what are you talking about? And he says, well, yeah, but games are supposed to be fun, right? Like, so here's the thing. If you walk over the bridge and it collapses and you die, you're just going to assume that's going to happen every time. Like, oh, that bridge is unsafe. It can't support a person. Don't use that bridge. And if you walk over it and it doesn't collapse, you're going to assume that it will never collapse, right? And then if you walk over it once and it doesn't collapse, and then you walk over it a second time and it does, you might assume it's random, right? So the person playing the game is never going to get that it's a weight limit thing, right? Unless you do something super obvious, like put a sign there that says weight limit and then a number, like a... I didn't go for Fizzle. I'm talking too much. So that's why you never saw anything like that in Ultima. But, yeah, I agree. So that's the thing about... I was thinking about that, where somebody assumed... Oh, yeah, if you get too far south, you get weaker enemies. You get the enemies that are part of that marsh where Erdrick's token is. Oh, don't you dare do that. Don't you fucking dare. Where the guy, I forget who it was that was telling me this, but the guy walked on the electric floor and died. Because in Dragon Quest games, you can die from damage 4s. It doesn't just bring you to 1 health and then you just stay at 1 health, right? It's not like Final Fantasy in that sense, or a lot of games. But, how much money we at? Oh, we're getting there. He made the assumption that it just kills you, and that you need some kind of item or spell to go over it, like you would need Erdrick's armor to go over it, right? And I had to explain to him, like, no, it just does a set amount of, it does a lot, but it does a set amount of damage. And it used to be, I believe it was 15 in the original NES version. You step on it with 15 health, you die. You step on it with 16 health, you're brought down to 1 health. But I can understand how that, isn't necessarily conveyed all that well. Now, see, in the case of Dragon Quest, though, I remember the original Dragon Warrior. I believe that it had an instruction manual that explicitly told you. They didn't call them electric. They called them barrier floors, I believe. There was the poison marsh, which didn't look purple back then. It was like black with specks. And it said, every step you take in the poison marsh will cost you 1 hit point. And then there's the barrier floor. Every step you take in the barrier floor will cost you 15 health points. So I believe it was, in that case, it's not terrible game design because the game explicitly told you that. Now, in this case, now we're playing games digitally. They don't really come with instruction manuals anymore, So I think that's, one of those things where I can see it happening, but they also lowered it. I think it's only I think they're taking 12 or I think it's 13 now. It's less. It's not 15. It certainly isn't. But yeah. So that's just my little diatribe about game design and sort of dirty tricks that you could play on the player like that. Because I agree with Gary, because he was talking about sort of like the sim RPG aesthetic that Western RPGs have, where there was another sort of, it was a pitch meeting that he was in, right? It was a pitch meeting where people were saying why their game was going to sell well, right? They were pitching it, right? And he said that every person there pitched their game in a disingenuous way. right? It was like, well, my game is the most realistic and immersive experience. And then another person's like, well, my game has lush graphics. You'll lose yourself in it, right? And my game has, like, amazing mechanics that is going to blow the player's mind, right? And Richard Garriott said, it's funny that not a single one of them said, mine's really fun. People are going to want to play it because it's enjoyable. And, now I'm not saying that every Ultima game was always the height of fun. But, like, remember how I said that Ultima and Wizardry sort of diverted from each other? And Garriott felt that, and I agree with this, that the problem with Wizardry is that with each successive Wizardry that came out, the designers made the assumption that the player had played all the other ones. We're getting very close here. And therefore, you get diminishing returns. I gotta go to the inn. You're gonna get diminishing returns there, and it becomes sort of like a boys' club of people that know how to play Wizardry, and it's this big barrier. If somebody like the new Wizardry game comes out, and it's like the barrier is, well, you're expected to have played all the other ones, whereas he felt that Ultima may tell an overarching storyline that goes throughout all the games, but you're never expected to have played all the other ones to enjoy the new one. And if you think about it, right, and then you have Dragon Quest in there. Right, Dragon Quest was a game that was inspired by Ultima, it was inspired by Wizardry, and that diverted in a completely different way where it's like, because people ask me all the time, like, what Dragon Quest should I start with? And I just go, play 11. And they're like, really, the 11th one? I'm like, yeah, it's the newest one, it's really good, just play that one. Well, do I have to have played all the others? And I said, no, absolutely not. You never have been expected to play previous ones. You will get more out of it if you have, but it's okay to jump in with 11 because it's a prequel anyway, so it's, And the best way to explain it is it's like The Legend of Zelda, where, yeah, ostensibly there's a timeline, right? That people the fans would like to sit and discuss the timeline and have debates about it and whatnot, but it doesn't matter. You can jump in and play any Zelda game without having played. The only one that sort of seemed to assume a lot was Majora's Mask. Ooh, nice. Did I one-shot him? Yeah, certainly did. Majora's Mask definitely assumes you played Ocarina, like 100%. But it didn't assume that you played Link to the Past, And Link's Awakening. Or Adventure Link. You know what I mean? It made one assumption. And for that's why I really didn't like it as much, even though I had played all those other games, and especially Ocarina. And I mean, it also gets to the point where, if somebody's jumping into a game that had makes those assumptions, it's not always like, okay, so like Final Fantasy 13 too. I remember jumping into that one, and Final Fantasy 13 was really heavy on tutorial, to the fact where you could be 30 hours in and still get tutorial pop-ups, because it eases you. It's got this very complicated system, it's very fast-paced. People see it and they're like, oh my god, how can you keep up with all that? How can you handle all that? And I'm like, well, the game eases you in over a period of a long time. It's like one mechanic at a time. And then part 2, it's like you're just thrown into the deep end, right? And then part 3 is tutorialized again because it has a completely different system for everything. Part of why I didn't like it, because I didn't like the new system. But that's personal opinion. But I'm saying when it says, 13.2, okay, you're kind of making, yeah, it's going to be for people that played 13, right? Yes, you can jump in. It's not that hard to figure out on the fly. But it definitely doesn't hold your hand, right? And I get how people would have been irritated if they're like, oh my god, I know how to play this. Why are they holding my hand? Just tell me what's new, Which is why I'm all for in-game tutorials being there, but I'm also for them being optional. Skippable, right? And when they become so ingrained in... Because, okay, 13, right? Playing that a second time is a little rough, because it's... I mean, it's not terrible, but it's like it tutorializes you a lot, and if you already know how to play it and you don't necessarily need a refresher, maybe you want a refresher, maybe you don't. You can't skip it because it's all baked into the game, right? One of the biggest offenders that I've seen recently, and I like this game, but ActRaiser Renaissance was a huge offender. ActRaiser was a game on SNES. It was developed by Quintet. Enix published it. Really good game, right? And it tutorializes you enough, right? And it's a game that you can get through in an afternoon, really. It's not a super long game, right? Maybe 2 days, right? ActRaiser Renaissance is a remake. And it essentially tells the same story, has the same levels, has like one extra area. But it adds a lot of new content in terms of mechanics and whatnot. And when I was first playing it, the first area, Fillmore, took me 2 hours. And I was like, I could be halfway through the original game, and I'm still on that first area. Because it's slow the way it tutorializes you. It babies you, to almost an obscene level. Thankfully, after that, it didn't do that anymore. Every once in a while, it would introduce a new concept, and there would be a quick thing kind of explaining the new concept. But people ask me, like, how good is ActRaiser Renaissance? And I say, well, the first part's rough. Like, you're going to have a rough time with Fillmore because of the way that the game kind of doesn't respect you all that much. But after that, it gets a lot better, so. That's Square Enix. It seems a lot of those games that I talk about that have tutorial issues are Square Enix, And I think Square Enix is just sitting there, collectively, missing the days of instruction manuals, right? Missing the days when they can explain everything on paper, and the game itself throws you into the deep end. But it's interesting, like, when you ask, well, why did instruction manuals disappear, right? And if you look at it, people say, well, because they were putting all the stuff in the game. They're tutorializing in-game. And you could make a lot of commentary about that, because people don't want to read it. People got no patience. They just want to play the game. They don't read the instruction manuals before they play the game like they used to. They don't know patience. They just put the game in, hit play, and expect to be able to, play it and be taught it in the game. And that's, not so much the case. I think that maybe it's the case, maybe it's not. I don't think it is. But that's not the reason that instruction manuals went away. Believe it or not, instruction manuals went away as an environmental cost. They're trying to save paper. And that was really what it is. I don't know, some companies still have instruction manuals, but they do them digitally. And I think that nobody looks at it that way, right? Nobody looks at it that way, because they're like, if you're going to do it digitally, you might as well just put it in the game, kind of thing, right? I think when you have something in your hands, this paper, you take it out, like, oh, here's instructions, and you open it up, and there's lots of cool art, And Dragon Quest games always had lots of cool art in them, right? We're very close here. See, I knew this was going to be an almost entirely grinding episode, which is why I decided to start talking about, just ramble on and give my opinion on things. And look at that. He tried to fizzle me. If he'd outsped me, I would have been fizzled, and all I could do was attack or run, Yeah. We actually need 1100-ish. Oh, I didn't mean to hit that again. Yeah. Wrong button. But I remember, like, back in the day, like, especially the NES era, Super Nintendo to a certain extent, PlayStation to a lesser extent. Maybe we just hit level 17. Got mid-heal. That speeds things up a bit. I don't need mid-heal now, but yeah. But I certainly enjoyed looking at instruction manuals. They were not only full of information, but they were full of pictures, cool artwork, you know, especially when you had the limited graphics. It was cool to see this is the artist's interpretation of what the characters actually look like, because back in the day you had to use your imagination with games a lot, and them giving you sort of an idea of, okay, this is exactly what the character looks like. You know, you can kind of imagine it in your head, you know. They were full of jokes too. There was a lot of like humor in a lot of those instruction manuals, especially if it was by Konami. Konami liked to put a lot of jokes in there and puns and shit in your instruction manuals. Sometimes there were weird hints, and sometimes it was really interesting because sometimes the instruction manual would be wrong or be mistranslated or would be based on an earlier version of the game. Like, there's a famous screenshot of the original Legend of Zelda, right? It's the very thing that first thing that happens in Legend of Zelda. You get the title screen. There's a story scroll thing. You put in your name. You start the game, and you're in this area. There's mountains. There's a cave, and you can go left. You can go right. You can go up, or you can go into the cave, right? And if you ignore the cave and you start just walking around, you realize that there are enemies and you don't have a weapon. You know, you're supposed to just go in that cave right away. There's an old man that says it's dangerous to go alone. Take this. And he gives you the first sword, which is not an exceptional weapon. It's, you know, it's a wooden sword. But, you know, it's a hell of a lot better than nothing, right? A hell of a lot better than nothing. And that was the idea. And then, but there's a screenshot in the instruction manual. I believe it might have been in the box, but I believe it was in the instruction manual. I'm running low on magic here. Of Link in that cave with the old man saying it's dangerous to go alone, take this. And there's the sword and the boomerang. And I thought, like, wow, that's interesting. Was it that you would get both initially, right? Or was it that you would choose between the two? Because a lot of times when you see that, where there's two items, you pick up one and the other disappears. And I thought to myself, that's interesting. I've never seen that. The game's not like that. And it was from a beta version where they had experimented with the idea of it being a choice between the sword or the boomerang. And the issue there in my head is, how would that work? I should just go to the end. Oh, I have enough, though. Yeah, let's go. How would that work? Because the boomerang doesn't kill enemies. It stuns them, you know? And then how would you get to the point where you would get the sword, right? And it's possible that the boomerang might have worked differently back then. All right, we have the shield. All right, let me sell my iron shield. And get a key. We'll stay at the inn. No, we only need the one. You know, so sometimes there's things like that. Sometimes there's hints that are wrong or that only apply to a different version of the game. Like another one, Legend of Zelda, right? It would tell you Dig Dogger is weak to a certain sound. And, you know, that was very true because the flute, the recorder would work on it, right? But then there was Paul's voice. Paul's voice, it would say it could be destroyed by a certain sound. And, you know, you could hit them with the sword and they would die eventually. But the one weapon that really, really worked on them was arrows, the bow and arrow. That would just cut through them like nothing. Like if you had them all lined up, you can just do one arrow that would go through all of them. So if the weakness is the bow and arrow, why is it like, oh, they're weak to a certain sound? Like what? Like just, you know? And it was years and years later. I thought it was just wrong or based on an old version. Years and years later, I found it in the Famicom version. You know, the Famicom had these two hardwired controllers, and the second controller didn't have like a select button or something. It had like a microphone on it. If you shouted into it, all the Pulse voices would die. Obviously, they had to take that out because it was not a feature in the NES. But anyway, I'm going to stop right here. We'll go after Erdrick's armor and the token next video. See you guys real soon with more Dragon Quest.